When I started doing the wildlife photography, I printed my own catalogue. For a short time, I was with Canada Pictures, but when Getty bought them, I left. I decided we would set up my own photo agency and sell picture licenses to people directly. And one thing Tony Stone taught me was that less is more. You don't need 50,000 images. Today, there are probably 1 billion pictures taken every day. Nobody knows. 1 billion with huge impacts on the climate with the amount of energy it takes. I printed my own catalogue, just a beautiful little book with the pictures in it, and I sent them out to various picture agencies. My wife, Kathy, who was a pharmacist, became our photo library manager. I was one of the very few people who had their own picture library, selling their work, selling licenses. That's how we made a living. That's how I was able to sponsor the trips, because it was very expensive. We were still, in those earlier days, we were still using film. And even then, if I'd go to the Masai Mara in Kenya for a month, I would have a £3,000 or £4,000 bill then. And now we're talking the 1990s for film and processing. And none of this business of having a compact flash cover.
Yeah. It makes me grateful for how easy it is for me. But then what you're saying is because it's so easy, everyone can do it, and therefore it's less valuable. So maybe, like it is, like you're saying, it's paradoxical. It's actually was a good thing that it was hard because a few people would be able to do it, which makes it profitable.
Exactly. Yeah. When I remortgaged my house and put all my money in it, my wife was absolutely terrified. What I was doing, we had 2 small children. We had a child had just been born and another one was 2 years old, and I was throwing everything into this machine that kept overheating in its air-conditioned room to try and get what we needed to charge £3 an hour time in this machine just to try to pay it. And it was terrifying. But nobody else, because nobody else had it, and because ad agencies were doing these huge posters, and the work with the Barcelona Olympics was hugely advantageous to us from a marketing perspective that we're doing. But then that died when Photoshop came along, and it's changing again, because now you have these huge AI challenges. And when photography came along, the painters were absolutely terrified. They thought, what are we going to do? We're going to be out of business. Someone can press a button and do what I spent 3 weeks in my studio with oil paints doing. What are we going to do? And it was a real fear for them. So they reinvented themselves, and Picasso came along with Cubism, and eventually led to abstract expressionism, and photography and painting is continually changing. And now I think photography has gone from analog to digital, then the ability to manipulate images. There was always the ability to manipulate images. I used to manipulate images professionally before digital. But now I think we're reaching a new era where photography needs to find another way. And I'm intrigued by the way people make a living as a photographer nowadays. Making a living as a wildlife photographer is very difficult now. And a lot of people are doing tours. I've only ever done one tour. I found it distracts you. When I was doing the photography, I'd have my own guides, and they were expensive operations, but the concentration, the focus was absolutely total. So doing tours is a bit of a compromise, but an economic necessity, because you don't have to pay for film anymore, but that aspect of it is free. The equipment has improved so much, but because of that, the competition is just blown out of the up like you won't believe. Yeah, it's hard. So I think with AI, there needs to be some kind of reinvention of photography in the way that painters had to reinvent the way they did. There's this bill going through Parliament at the moment regarding copyright, and this crazy idea with the government that you need to opt out. You need to list everything that you want to opt out of, otherwise AI will have a free rein. And I think the government doesn't understand copyright and doesn't understand the challenges. You can't just legalize theft. It's as if the government said everybody's got to make a list of everything they own, and they've got to give it to thieves, and thieves can go through it. If anything of yours is not on the list, they're legally allowed to steal it. That is the absurdity of
it's
the spill.
How do you opt out a photo that's on the internet as well? Because it's basically everywhere.
I typed into ChatGPT, asked it to make a picture of an eagle flying over a waterfall. It's so close to one that I did, right down to the rock formations. After this interview, I'm planning to post it on Instagram. And of course, once you put something on Instagram, Meta says, yeah, it's something for us to put into our AI. You can't survive without it. So the thing that I think about a lot is, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do collectively as photographers, as artists? This whole stock thing for me is finished. I've essentially shut down my photo library, and I'm now moving more into producing silver gelatine or printing on Japanese paper. And I'm building up now an archive of fine art prints and shutting. The two can't exist side by side. The photographers who would never touch stock, and the stock photographers who could never go into fine art, and so they're separable. So I've pushed one aside and I'm moving into the other. And the challenge is the uniqueness of the print. After being at Photo London and seeing what people were doing, I think the way forward is to turn photographs back into unique, valuable objects. I have, from my South Africa days, a number of vintage silver gelatine prints. These can't be repeated. They can't go back in time. It's a finite number, and that gives them the value. I think where people just churn out numerous inkjet prints and they're all identical, you have to be very careful in that way. I'm experimenting with taking photographs and mixing them with paint and doing painting with acrylic on photographs, just trying to give them a unique aspect, a unique element. And I think that will give them volume, because the other thing is, we are so bombarded with images and our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. And I wish TikTok had never been invented, because that's what Instagram and all these others were bad until, and because when people look at photographs now on their phones,
it's like fast food almost.
Yeah. And somehow we've got to find a way of slowing down and almost a Zen-like approach to photographs. One bit of advice I often give to young photographers is, who are shooting digitally, is pretend you've got a roll of 20 exposure film in there, and you've got to think carefully before you press the shutter. This idea that you take a picture and edit later, you should be mindful in your approach to it.
I definitely agree. I know David Yarrow and Ansel Adams both kind of have that similar mindset of visualizing and seeing the picture and planning the picture before you actually take it. And so you saying with the prints, it's not good enough to just create these inkjet prints. It's also important to create these prints on amazing paper and possibly making it an edition of one, like a almost work of art. Do you think that's the way forward?
I'm going to quote Ansel Adams. He likened the negative to a musical score and the print to the performance.
Yeah.
And that is so important. The subtle darkening here and lightening there and just controlling the light. In the old days, it was, you didn't need Photoshop. You'd use your hand to dodge, and you'd put on a piece of coat hanger a little bit of cutout paper. So I think it's very important for people to learn darkroom techniques, even if they don't practice it, because I think it gives you an understanding of the slowness in making pictures. And then, of course, with darkroom prints, each one was different. There would be subtle differences. Yeah, there are too many images for us to be able to absorb them and to give them value. If I can just go back to imaging licensing and stock photography, I only had about 100 images that I made quite a good living out of when we were licensing them directly. And now the agencies boast they've got millions and millions. You can't edit, you can't sort millions. You only need a small number of good images to have an identity. If you think of any of the legendary photographers, whether you're thinking of Richard Avedon or Irving Penn or any of these guys, one or two pictures come up in your head. that you've noticed. Your brain can't accommodate 20,000 of their pictures. You don't need 20,000 pictures. Vermeer, I think he only painted something like 20 something in his whole life, and they're all just incredible. And so that for me is important in an approach to photography, to not just keep producing more and more.
Yeah, it's limiting what you show to the world. You can take 10,000 images, but only maybe one or two are actually going to be valuable enough to make any profit from.
Exactly. And it also impacts on people's perception of a photographer. If you're showing a portfolio and you're coming in with 300 pictures, then you get tired. If you come in with 10, and each one is absolutely amazing, and they reach number 10 and they think, wow. And they're not going to be disappointed by number 15 or number 20 or 30 or whatever.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, less is more. Like scarcity does definitely add value, especially if you're doing a fine art career. Do you think fine art is the way to go, especially with AI?
I think it is. And I didn't go that route earlier on in my career because, to be honest, the stock route at the time was much more lucrative. But interestingly, fine art, it's still a challenge. And I listened to an absolutely fascinating podcast a couple of months ago with Paul Graham, and he was talking, and I remember him from the 1980s, Bristol, and he's very well known and successful, and his work is in top museums, but he spoke about the real challenge and how he was struggling financially earlier on. And with fine art photography, like anything else, you can be the flavor of the month one month, and then you can be dropped by galleries when somebody else comes along. Now, I just had an informal general chat with one of the top photo galleries, blue chip, selling the work of top art photography artists. I won't say who it is. I had a chat with them at Photo London the other day, and he was telling me that it's a struggle. He said the hardest type of art to sell is photography. And that's the sphere he's in. Because there is this perception that photography is easily reproducible. And that's why I think the prints have to be something special, like platinum palladium prints. I've had some platinum palladium prints done. They're absolutely beautiful. They're very expensive to make, which is a problem, but that also gives them value because they're so expensive to make and because they've got this wonderful metal and you have this depth in the shadows that is just can't be simulated with any other process.